Well, hello everybody, and welcome again to another live session, but this time I'm going to work on this wing of this lovely peacock here. It's a lovely colour, isn't it? You can see it down the right hand corner there. Now, the wing itself, as you can see, there's a lot of detail. I'm just going to put the other photograph on for you so you can see it in a minute. But loads and loads of detail on there. Just bear with me. Take that one off, put that one on there. Trying to do the computer work at the same time here, as you can imagine. When you look around here, we've got quite a lot of this lovely blue colour, which I've just mixed up here. And this is turquoise, I know, different colour for me today. Opera rose, and ultramarine violet. So a nice sort of triple combination. When you look at that one on some scrap watercolour paper, it's that sort of colour there. If you water that down, you're looking at something like that. He says it's very similar to the one in that wing though, isn't it? Very similar. So turquoise is a lovely colour and one I very rarely use, to be honest with you. But what I'm going to do first of all is lightly soften down that wing. I'm going to leave it slightly dark on my pencil marks here because I want you to see it on the camera. I want to make it as clear as possible for you. Anyway, how are you today? There we go. Hope you got your paintbrushes ready as well, so you can have got something similar to this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with this colour here. And this is a mixture of Gambo hue and cadmium orange. Very, very watery. And all these mixes at the moment are mostly watery. I think a couple of these are more or less more of a milky consistency. So watery, just like the water from your tap or from your faucet. So start off with the lightest colours first of all. So it's with this lovely yellow that we can see. The brush I'm using today is a size 00. It's one by Winsor & Newton as a Cotsman series 111. As I mentioned, size 00, nice and fine. It's a synthetic bristled brush as well. And it's a maker brush I've been using for many, many years. Just going to wet the side of this now and just soften that yellow down. So therefore it's going to be brighter, more intense towards the middle. Then duller towards the edges. And that's that one area already done. I know, as quick as that. So if I get some more yellow, I can see a little bit more on the left hand side of here. So I'm going to put a little bit of colour there first of all. It's a bit too intense, a bit too rich. So a damp clean brush again and soften it back. Take note where the blue starts. You don't want to add the blue on just yet. Make sure the yellow is dry first, okay? Otherwise, you know you're going to get, aren't you, with blue and yellow. What do you mean purple? Green, you know that. Of course you do. You do know that. You're not as daft as me, are you? No. So soften that down a little bit more there, look. What else have we got? Yellow. So we've got along the top of the wing here. So again, I'm looking between these areas here. So a bit of yellow there first of all. And then water it down, soften it back. Soften it back. Just here. I'm going to carry on adding the yellow in now. What I can do is actually add a little bit of water just to one side of my mixing well here. This is a ceramic palette. Can't get to ting, hang on. Nearly, you can just about hear it. It's a nice ceramic palette. I prefer that because if I'm using a plastic palette, you find that the paint tends to lie when there's a big bubble, doesn't it, when you've got a plastic palette? Whereas ceramic palettes, the paint dries nice and flat. You can see that with the orange there, look, how flat it is in there. Whereas if it was plastic, that'd be like a bubble in the middle. Normally, or in my case, to one side, because I've got my board on a slight angle like that. So I'm going to add the yellow in, skipping one every now and then as well, so it's not all the same. A little bit in there as well. So watered down. A bit like a zebra pattern on there, isn't it? The way it sort of zigzags up and down. And we can create that with the darkest colour in a bit. If I can show you how to do one side, or at least one section, might not be all of it, we'll see how we'll get on time-wise, then it'll give you an idea on how to do the rest of it, wouldn't it? I can just see a little bit of yellow, only a little bit, around here, which are mixed in with our oranges. Which I'll be popping in shortly. I'll tell you all about the colours if you go through the process as well, by the way. Okay, a little bit more down there. I do like to use a size 00 brush because I've got control over that. Yes, you can get the longer bristle brushes as well. Especially with a size 00, you can get a rigger brush if you wanted to. But can you imagine how floppy that would be on the paper? You want a bit more control, a bit more precise movements on there, you know. And also take note how low down I'm holding my brush. So quite low down next to the metal ferrule there. So really low. Again, so I've got more control over that brush. Just soften that back a touch. Now because we've not pre-wetted the paper, you find that these areas dry fairly swiftly. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to add a bit of blue in there, or that purpley blue, or the turquoise, as I mentioned, the opera rose and the ultramarine violet. And I'm going to remix that as well, because that opera rose is a granulating colour and it does kind of split apart from the other colours in there. Always mix more than you think you'll need as well, because lo and behold, you won't have enough. And when it's a more complicated mix, very often you think, oh no, I've run out. That one I'm going to do, you know. So always make it more than you think you'll need. Otherwise, trying to get that same colour again is very tricky, isn't it? You can do it, of course you can. I'm going to soften this down, by the way. It's a bit too rich, that. I'm also going to stipple with it as well on top of this yellow now. Hopefully I won't get too much green in there. I know. Stipple it along and blend it out. I can see a bit of a division as well between this next section here. So I'm just going to very lightly leave it a fine gap there. Hope you can see that. And then just blend it back again, doing the same thing. But we've got a bit of a lighter patch just around there, haven't we? So I'm going to lighten that down there, and then blend it again. Working around that area. Don't make it too neat either, because it's not, is it? And then around here, this black area here we can add in afterwards. So it just means you can fill that in. And then bring that all the way down to this point here we've drawn out. So that's another one just about done in there. Obviously we can darken it, we can add a bit more contrast in there if need be. But I think that's plenty for now. Remix. And we'll do another one here. So that's 1, 2, there's a third one here. And that sort of stipples towards here, tiny dots lot. Using the very tip of the brush. Then separate them as well, slightly wider at the top. Then very fine gap between the two as you work your way down. And once again, there's a bit of a pale area around there. I'm going to soften that down again in a minute. Just around this area here. Rinse that brush out, soften that back so it's not too obvious. If you forget to put that in, what you can do is lift the paint off once it's dry. But let it dry first of all. Sometimes I add detail in by using the lifting off process as well. Because that's really useful to know that as well. So if you can just do the lifting off process, it's a sort of negative painting in a way. Because you're taking paint away rather than putting paint on. Well, you put the paint on in the first place. Then you take it away again. I know. Then we've got the larger one here. I think I'll work on this section with you initially, okay? So I'm going to stipple further away. And then I'm going to bring this line down, right hand side. I need some more paint. Or left hand side actually of that section, is it not the right? Left, right, left. Yeah. Then all the way down. Look at the shape as that as well. Kind of curves around a bit of a shape just there. Sort of reminds me of a comet going down in the sky. The sort of shape this is, isn't it? I'm going to stipple now. Plenty of little marks within them. I'll soften this down afterwards. What I want really is like a texture. I remember somebody once said to me when I painted the butterfly, Paul, this supposed to be smooth. But when you look at that photograph there, you can see there's a lot of detail inside a wing, isn't there? It's not smooth really. You know, from a distance, it does look smooth. But yet when you get close up to it, not so much macro, then you can actually see more detail within it, can't you? You really can. So that's that area there. And let's do one more around here, and that one there as well. So again, all I'm going to do, take most of the paint off the brush, so it's not too intense, too rich. And this time I'm going to stipple, creating detail using the stippling method. And a bit of a circle, like that. Okay. Clean down brush again. Then very lightly soften. I don't want to soften it completely, I still want to be able to see these little stipple marks. But only just, only just. A few more around there, barely touching the paper, so literally 2 hairs in air. And one more, una más. One more to go. So very lightly going around the edge of that. When I load my brush, I'm loading up like that, look. I'm going to roll as I pull away very often. Then give it a couple of taps or so on some kitchen roll. That just takes any residual paint off that brush. Just make sure that I don't go, well, too heavy with the paint first of all. And also I'll give you a finer tip on that brush as well. So that's another tip of the day for you. There you go. How many more tips of the day can we give you? If you've got any questions you want to ask, then please do so. I don't mind answering them where I can, but it might be after the video's gone live though. So I'm trying to concentrate on doing this for you. But you're more than welcome to ask some questions or say hello, okay? And also, we got a bit of a line going around there. Bit of a sad smile. Sad face around there. Just there. And some odd ones dotted around here and there as well. Just like that. Okay. This is where you can get some kitchen roll. Load the brush up with water, take most of that water off. And then work out where those little dots go, the very fine pale dots. Then dab it with a kitchen roll. That will take off a small amount of paint. I mean a small amount of paint. But it's enough just to soften it back and just create that lighter area in the middle there. That's all I've had to do with that. I know. Problem is if you go too intense with the colour, then you find when you get the other colours around it, it doesn't stand out enough. So you want to make sure it stands out really well. Okay, reds. Here we go. You ready for this? This particular one is a mixture of Gamboa Hue, Scarlet Lake and Cadmium Orange. Again to a watery consistency. Quite watery in there. I do the same method again by using the stippling technique initially. We'll see how we get on with that. Look where it goes to. So I'm going to start about there. Oh, too much on the brush as usual. Take a little bit off. Tiny, tiny stipples. See that? That's what I'm doing. And you can see this is sort of the underlying colours, not the top colour. That's more this colour here, isn't it? I'll tell you about that one in a minute. But start to work this around by creating these stipples. You don't have to stipple either. When you get some more condensed area or concentrated area like this, use tiny squiggle motions, and all that is. I've got any more watercolour paper here, look, I'll just show you what I mean. Like. Instead of stippling like that, you can do squiggles like that. Just let your hand go, whoa, not that much, but you can tiny, tiny little tight squiggles. And by doing so, I'll give you a much more sort of I don't know, textured feel to that part of the wing. Okay, a little bit more around there. Now then, people very often ask me what the type of paper is I use, you know. I tend to vary a little bit, but only between normally 3 different brands. One is Arch, or Arch, different ways of saying it, isn't there? And that one's quite good paper. Of course, it's a well-known paper, isn't it, really? I do have problems with that sometimes with when I'm using masking fluid, and sometimes it tears the paper and so on. And it's more of a, I don't know, more of a textured paper compared to the other papers I use. The other 2 papers I use, normally, my most preferred one is the Bockingford, which is by St Cuthbert's Mill. And so that's what I'm using at the moment. Quite a nice paper, actually. It's not cotton or anything like that. It's like a chemical pulp. So it's quite a nice one to use anyway. And I've been using Bockingford paper for many, many years. And also, it's not too pricey either. Because we know that some papers can cost quite a lot of money. You've got to take a mortgage out, I know. Not quite, but I mean, it's not cheap, I know. So Bockingford's quite good. Now, St Cuthbert Mill, I don't get paid one, by the way. They also do another one, which is called Saunders Waterford. And that's another one I do like, and that one is cotton. But they're the two sort of go-to papers for me, to give you some ideas. The weight is £140, and say it's a nice texture to work on. And very often when I'm working on my main paintings, as you'll see in a bit, I'll show you one in a bit, I tend to work with a block pad. In other words, it's glued all the way around, so we've got quite a lot of sheets stuck together. Glue all the way around the pad, obviously, as I say. Just like them glued books used to get, you know, them notepads. But instead of all one side, you get all four sides. Other than a tiny gap right at the very top of the pad, of the paper, where when you finish the painting, you can slide a palette knife in there. And then you can take that sheet of paper off quite easily, which is quite good. Okay, so that goes to about there. I think that will do for that area there. For now. What I do with these other areas here, I go with a larger brush in that area because it's obviously a bit more free there. We can just go for it in those areas in that area. But here, I think that will do for that. Just lightly soften it back. And then we'll go in with a deeper colour next. Very lightly soften it. You can still see the stipples, but it's just knocked it back a touch. Okay. I'm going to go for this one. It's the same mix, believe it or not, and that one's thickened down a little bit while it's been sat there. Now it's more of a milky consistency. This one is Gambo Hues, Cadmium Orange, Scarlet Lake, same as that one, but also alizarin crimson. So water off there. Be careful when you're washing your brush out because very often water sticks to your metal ferrule there and then runs down and goes blobbing all over your paper, all over your detail work that you've been working on. And that can be very, very irritating, I know. I've done it many times, honestly. So the same process again with that one by stippling the detail on, but less so on the outer edges around there. So it's going to get deeper, more intense. Thinking about colour now, thinking about contrast. Because this is where we start to go a little bit darker. These are more or less the mid-tones, aren't they? I'm going to just tap in, just a few odd ones in that gap there. The same with this gap down here as well. And this one as well, there you go. And just going to go a little bit more around there. And I think that will do, apart from this area here. It's all done with a size 00 brush. If you wanted to use like a size 2 or size 4, like this one here, let me just wet that one a minute. This one I very often do use because this is a Rosemary & Co. XP Series 366. Quite a nice brush to use. Size 2, and I've got a size 4 and a size 6. And these have got a very long tapered point, as you can see. So good for detail as well. It really is. Okay, if you want any information about the materials I tend to use on a regular basis, I do have a link in the description down below. Okay, so if you want to have a look in there for my materials list. And that'll take you to my website where I've got it all displayed on there so you can see what I use. You don't have to buy anything, but you can just see what I tend to use more than anything. If you're curious, if you are curious and you want to find out. Okay, that's that area there. Now, mentioning butterflies, guess what we've got going at the moment on Patreon? We've got another butterfly I'm working on. Pardon? I know you're ready for this. This is one. Let's just quickly dry this with a hairdryer. I'm just going to show you this one for 1 minute, okay? 1 sec. Hi, my name is Paul Hopkinson and welcome once again to one of my watercolour video lessons. Now, today's project for you is how to paint a lovely swallowtail butterfly. Now, there's a variety of different swallowtail butterflies around the world, but this is the one that we get here in the UK. And our main focus today is working with masking fluid. Also, we've got to paint the whole thing, of course we do. But masking fluid is one of those substances which you need to really control carefully, because too much of it can sometimes ruin the paper or ruin a painting, and not enough of it doesn't give the effect that you want. Now, traditionally masking fluid is used to reserve the white of the paper, isn't it? But in this case, what we're going to be doing is to reserve the colours on the paper. Yeah, a little bit different. And also, I'm going to be using the masking fluid to create all these tiny dots here. We'll add more detail over the top of that as well, by the way. But lots of these dots here we can see within the wings and around the bottom of the wings as well. But by doing so, that creates a lovely textured feel to those wings. So once we've painted the background, painted the flowers nice and pale on there, what we need to do is work on all the detail for this lovely swallowtail butterfly. So I think we're better get the brushes wet, don't you? And let's get started. Well, there you go, and that's what we're working on Patreon at the moment. Give us some ideas. So it's quite related to this one in a sense, because it's another butterfly. Something that I enjoy painting because they're so detailed, as I mentioned earlier on. I've just switched to my size 2 brush for a minute. Just while I sort of block these in now. So I want to do this one section with you today if I can. Now, if you paint anything like this area here, if you're working on these sort of butterflies anyway, don't make it too neat, as I said down there. Because if you do, what will happen is that they can look too drawn. And when you look carefully at that reference photograph, and I mean very carefully, you see what I mean, that it's not like that, is it? You know, it's broken up quite a lot. The more you zoom in and the more you look, the more you tend to see. And that's the way I tend to paint. So my eyes are going back and forth to my tablet, which I've got directly in front of me. I can't take it off. And because I'm going every few seconds doing that, I tend to remember more what's going on, you know, what's in that area. I really do. A little tip as well, which I nearly forgot to mention earlier on actually when I started this, is that if you did want to do something like this and you wanted to work on the details, sometimes it's very difficult to kind of follow those details on the screen, isn't it, when you look in that photograph. If you, oh, I lost my way, where is it, where am I working? Very difficult to kind of hone your eye in on where you left off. So what I tend to do occasionally is just cut out pieces of card, and all it is a bit of watercolor card like this lot, with a square cut out or circle, whatever you want, whatever size you want. You would offer one of these over your reference photograph, then also one over your painting. That hones your eye in directly to that one area then when you're working on it. You think, oh yeah. Rather than your eyes wandering around thinking, where did they get to, where did they get to? I do that all the time otherwise. So remember, piece of card, anything will do. This is a piece of off-cut watercolour paper, that's all it is. Like. And I've got 2 of those, say one for the computer or one for the screen that you're working from. Be an iPad, tablet, mobile phone, whatever you're working from. And also one on your painting, of course. There you go, there's another tip of the day for you. There's too many tips of the day going on there. It should be one, shouldn't it? I'm going for the richer colour now. I want to get these in so that I can show you the deeper tones in a bit. Okay. I'm assuming that's focused. Bear with me a minute. Shouldn't be doing this on live on camera. Just checking the camera there, make sure you got a focus there, okay? I'm going to stipple again around this area, get some more that deeper tone in there now, but lessening when we get to the lighter area there. So it's not quite as intense in that area. Now when I'm working on something like this, I'm doing it fairly swiftly in this case, believe it or not. They can take me hours, many hours of work, of stippling, fine tuning, lifting paint off, putting paint on. Very enjoyable as well. But even though it takes many hours, I also make sure I take plenty of breaks. And you need it as well. Because when your eyes are focused on a lot of detail work, you need to rest those eyes. You know, go and put the kettle on, make a cup of tea or something like that. Go and spy on the neighbours, anything. No, forget the latter one, I know. Shouldn't be doing that. Anything just to kind of take your eyes away from that painting a little bit, you know. And by doing so, you come back with those fresh eyes, and very often, you spot a few mistakes along the way. You think, oh yeah, that's not quite right. Or that's not quite the right colour. I've done that so many times, I really have. Okay, that'll do for that area. So what I want to do is add our deeper colours in there now. Our sort of browny greys around the edge. And also we've got these dark black areas here, haven't we? So we need to put those in as well. So what I'm going to go for is this little beastie here, and that's sepia and Payne's grey. Another colour I don't often use is sepia. So I'm going to very lightly pop this in first of all. Oh, I'll tell you what, I just noticed this on the photograph. When you look at this area here, this is a bit more intense. And the colour is different as well slightly. It's got a bit more purple in there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm sticking with the size 2 for a minute, as you gathered. Just going to break up the edge a little bit, soften this down so it's not as bright, not as dark, should I say, in this case. Don't want it too dark on there. And then, whilst it's damp, I'm going to dampen that area there a minute. We'll drop in a bit of our purple colour, you know the one there, just that one there. Okay, a little bit more of that in there. Sound effects are optional, of course. Then break up the edge just by stippling so it's not too neat. Okay. And then soften that back so you can't see where one colour starts and the other finishes, or thereabouts. Then grab some of our purple colour. Remix. Come apart again, I know, terrible. And add that in to the edge of this here. Sort of purpley blue, isn't it? Just the very edge. And we know we've got a darker edge around this as well, which I'll be putting in very shortly. Just do the same on this one here. I might dampen it first of all, just to save time. Not that we should ever rush a painting. Now, somebody said to me once, Paul, how did you start watercolour? How did you start painting in the first place? Well, I started painting, believe it or not, over 40 years ago. 40 years? I'm an old man, I know. But 40 years ago, or thereabouts, 42 years I think it is, something like that anyway. Got to think how old I am. Well, I'm 21. Yeah, okay. But 40 years ago, it's quite a long time. And I started off working with oil paints first of all, painting the landscapes in Derbyshire, up near Chesterfield, lad. They're all right. I was brought up there, you know, for my teenage years in Chesterfield in Derbyshire. I used to go painting with my uncle, who was also an artist, and really enjoyable with my uncle Peter. And you know, since then I've painted all the way from there, you know, from my own exhibitions through to, you know, working from oils as I mentioned, working then acrylics, then working with coloured pencils, and then finally working with watercolours, which I started, oh, I don't know, maybe about 15 years ago, something like that. Just properly anyway. I used to kind of dabble with watercolours, but not properly. Not with the animal portraits I tend to work on nowadays. Okay, got that? So that's what we've done on that one. So that's what I've been doing all my life, painting. But not for a job until probably about 8 years ago, something like that anyway. Okay, then what you can do, you can a little bit more in on the underside, darken it down slightly. I want to get more of a curved feel to that area there now. How did you start painting? How long have you been painting actually? Just let me know in the comments, eh? How long have you been painting for with watercolours? Or painting in general? And don't say painting your house or your walls. You know what I mean. Then very lightly soften that down. If you say 100 years, I'd like to see the proof of that, okay? Then I'm going to go for the darkest colour. That's got the same mix, believe it or not, of sepia, Payne's grey, but this time, a tiny amount of lamp black, lampest blackest. I've not changed this brush yet, but you can see it's got a very fine tip on it. I'm going to stress the word very. And this line is not all the same thickness. It kind of goes thicker and thinner in places. Comes out there. Again, my eyes are glancing back and forth with that photograph every few seconds again. It's directly in front of me at the moment. And if I lift my tablet up at the moment, there'll be a big clatter because I've got things propping it up. Oh dear. The art of being live. I don't know. So this filter goes all the way around, but it's less so in certain places. So what I'm going to do with that is just soften down, clean down brush, just soften down certain areas where you think, oh yeah, probably not quite as intense around there. Not as dark there. Probably not as dark there, so I'm going to soften that back. Okay, bring a few lines through as well. Then bring that further down here. Just to there. And then we've got a few odd lines going down here into the damp paper as well. Look at the direction these go as well, okay? For example, if I get some more brown again, this area here sort of comes down, what, towards 8 o'clock direction, would you say? That way? Or 2 o'clock that way if you want. I very often work on a clock face idea. Something I've done for years, because I just find it easier to kind of visualise something then. So if we're saying that one's curving down towards 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock, then it gives you a good idea on the direction you need to go. Okay, that's that area done now. Just about anyway. I can fine tune and tweak that if I wanted to, as much as I want. Normally, I would do, because I don't want to bore you too much. And if I am, please say. Then I don't want to spend too long on that area there for you. It gives you some general idea on what to do there, doesn't it? You can fiddle and try and tune that as much as you want. Now, well, that was serious, wasn't it? I'm going to work on this area here now. And also this area here. In fact, we'll do that area first. Dark colour. You know the one now. Stipple. Sticking with the size 2 for now. I know Jo's enjoying this downstairs. She's watching this live at the moment and she just had a massive yawn. So I'll stipple this like we did with the other colours. I've dropped her in it now, I know. And down there. Stippling all the time. Okay, and then bringing down a few now towards the red side, the red section. You can see how much work something like this takes. As long as you take your time with it and enjoy it, it's not a problem. It's not a problem at all. And you don't have to do it all in one sitting either. Do it in numerous sittings if you want to. An hour here, an hour there. That's all it takes. And switch yourself off, then all you're going to think about is your painting. Nothing around your normal day-to-day lives. Just that painting. Just you and your brushes and your paints. And your shadow. And we know a song about that, don't we? Yeah, okay, I'll stop. Okay. I'm going to dampen down this area here and then also the edge as well. A little bit there. Dampen down the edge. A bit of colour left on that brush from here, though. Making use of it. Then fill in the rest of the areas. Now this area here, I can just scumble. And I remember talking about scumbling earlier on. Scumble? Scumble? Yeah, scumble. But when it gets to this edge, very lightly break it up, so it's not too neat. Curves around the corner, down to about there. And once again, bring that edge up as well. Tiny, tiny little dots, like that. Not too neat at all. Fill this in, a broken edge around there. All the way up around here. This will then give you the contrast we need for this wing. Give us some general idea on how to kind of go about this. So scumble all the time, bringing it up to about there. And then a bit more paintball. Just about there. I do like watercolour because the simple fact is, it's clean. It's a clean medium, isn't it? I enjoyed watercolour, well I enjoyed watercolours, but I enjoyed oil painting, which was great. I did that, as I mentioned, for many years, doing portraits as well as landscapes and wildlife. But the good thing about watercolour, it doesn't smell as well. You know, there's no smell to it hardly, is there? Nothing, right? No, of course not. Whereas when I'm using oil paints, I've got turpentine or linseed oil and all sorts of different chemicals you're using with it sometimes. And I found, for me, being asthmatic, that I found it very tricky on my, using something like that. It got a bit on your chest a bit, didn't it? So working with watercolours, it's a clean medium. It really is. Very useful to kind of get the hand of. And also it's the sort of thing you can kind of get the painting gear out and start without too much fuss. Just wet your paints and away you go. For example, these paints in this palette here, my mixing palette here, as you can see, when they're dry, all I need to do is reactivate them. I'll get a light misting bottle, which is something like this one here, look. I very lightly spray them, then give them a mix, and then reuse them again. Yes, eventually they can go a little bit bitty in there, but to be honest with you, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because of the fact is you can mix them more over the top of that, but it also saves wasting paint as well. So that's why I like watercolour, because it's a clean medium to work with. And it's a challenge one as well, very challenging, because you've got to work in layers all the time. Which, as you know, I'm working with here. We start off with the lightest layers, which are the yellow, then the blue as well, then the midtones, which will be the red, or very orange. I might put another layer over the top of that yet. And then the darkest layer over the top of that. Now for these finer marks, make sure there's not too much paint on that brush. Again, I'm still sticking with this size 2 brush, which is quite large for me, to be honest with you. But I don't mind, I don't mind. I like to challenge myself with something like this. Now, I don't normally outline anything like this, but there is a line around the outside edge of this, as you can see. I'm using the curvature of my hand to paint that one in. And then get these zebra stripes in. Zebra stripes. Like that. Get a few in. Do as many as you want. It doesn't have to be the same as that photograph 5, of course not. No, of course not, it doesn't. Okay, just like that. A few more there. And you can actually, look carefully at that photograph. And some are wider, some are slimmer as you work around there. There you go. And then, when they shouted then, I'm going to get serious now. Then, I can never be serious. I'm going to stipple just below that area there, and also stipple on the underside of this line I've just painted. So it doesn't look like it's been outlined, like it's a cartoon. Because there's a problem if you start outlining paintings, it really is. And we can do the same by stippling along this yellow area here. Like that. Okay, a bit more down there. Okay, one last thing, just for now anyway. I can work on this as much as I want off camera. I'm going to kind of reinforce this area here, put a bit more colour in there. Every layer of colour you add, because we're working with transparent paints, will get deeper in tone each time, get richer. And you can place it where you want. If I wanted this side to be slightly richer than that side, I can do. You're in charge of those paints, remember. You can do whatever you want with it. And you can also use a little bit of artistic license here and there as well. Of course you can. So that'll give you some general idea on how to work on something like this, how to kind of work out how to layer the different colours that you've got by starting with that lightest layer first, as I mentioned, okay, and then working from that point onwards, finishing with the darkest layer. However, what I tend to do as well, which I'm not doing today, so no need to, is work with white paint as well. White paint? Really? I know. Some people are very traditional, aren't they, with the way they tend to paint. I'm not. I paint the way that I want to paint as an individual. So I tend to use white paint, I tend to use black paint. Not all the time. Because I do find it works really well with my style of painting and the way I tend to work. And that's down to you as an individual again. You don't have to follow a tradition if you don't want to. I certainly don't. I never have, to be honest with you. I'm just working on these areas here just briefly before I go and put the kettle on. I'm just going to stipple this dark colour now around the blue and into the blue as well, leaving gaps in between, of course. So it's all about stippling. Adding those tiny dots in there. I've not changed the brush again, have I? No, I've still got the size 2 here. Just goes to show what a good brush it is, and not an expensive brush either. What? I know, makes a change. I tend not to buy expensive brushes, I really don't. Because sometimes you can just wear away just as quick as a kind of least expensive ones, not cheap ones, sort of middle road prices these are. Okay. And that's going to give us some ideas how to paint something like this now, isn't it? So I've enjoyed that for my live session. So I'll see you next time around when I work on something a little bit different.